Good afternoon, everybody. It is so wonderful to be with you today, Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. My name is Megan Hyman. I am the president and CEO of the Dallas Jewish Community Foundation. Joining me today is my friend and colleague, Barry Schweitzer, who is the CEO of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, as well as members of the Stanley family, Mark Stanley and his brother, David Stanley. We are really excited to put together a special joint program today, shining a light on the Stanley family legacy and the family's impact on the community, as well as how they've been wonderful partners and friends of the two organizations putting on this program today. So why don't we switch to our first slide here. Since 1973, the Dallas Jewish Community Foundation has been honored to work alongside a wonderful community of philanthropists and nonprofits that are all dedicated to sustaining and enhancing Jewish life in Dallas, in Israel, and around the world. And there's really no better reflection of that than the group that's joining you today. Barry and myself, we're located here in Dallas. Mark Stanley is dialing in from Argentina, and David Stanley, who we hope will be able to join us, has just landed in Israel yesterday. And this is a really special visit because he is his 18-year-old son is joining him there on his first time ever to the state of Israel. So we're really excited to have this literal representation of this global community that we've built over the course of 50 years together. So with that, Barry, why don't I turn it over to you? You can share a little bit about the work that the Historical Society does in partnership with families like the Stanleys.
Perfect. Yes, you will actually see some of the work that we've done together in the video clips that we'll be showing shortly. If you want to go to the next slide, I think that might be some more information, because while DJCF has been around since 1973, we've actually been around since 1971, just a few years, but we've really the key to the Dallas Jewish Historical Society is that we are the story keepers of the Dallas Jewish community. So that means that we help to preserve, catalog, and keep those stories of Jewish Dallas and beyond for the last 150 years. And it's really about supporting and fostering these important connections that help us to thread our Dallas community's tapestry together. Because part of what we do is it's threefold. It's having a 20,000 plus items in our vault. We also have an active oral history project, which again, we're going to be able to show some clips from. We have over 900 recorded oral histories that we call also legacy projects, which we'll talk about, and multiple educational programs that we have throughout the year, like this one. So you'll get a chance. We're going to talk about a little bit really how the passion that Rini had for the Historical Society and what that gift has allowed us to do. It's really made a huge difference this year in the fact that Rini's vision and how we've been able to have community pop-ups, expanding our goal to be a museum without walls. It's allowed us to display this massive collection of over 20,000 historical items and documents, like the ones we recently had at our annual meeting, showing Dallas's first Jewish doctor, Dr. Emil Aronson, who was in 1906. We were able to display all of his content, as well as other displays that we've had at Anshe Torah to Fair at Israel, here at the hallway at the JCC, and of course at the lobby of the Texas Health Resources Hospital, formerly Presby, which has allowed us to share these valuable stories of the Jewish community to thousands of Dallas residents of all generations and all backgrounds.
I would say that anything on behalf of Israel has been very important in my life. In my life, in the lives of my children, and most of my friends, all of my friends.
What was Dallas like when you got here?
It was a small town compared to where we had lived before. Certainly smaller than New York or London. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. The people were very friendly in business, and people we became friends with.
Did the Jewish community embrace you guys?
Absolutely, absolutely. Not only the Jewish community, but all of the Jewish people in the medical supply were very, very open, friendly, more than friendly, yes. We knew no one here. Jewish Community Center. I was involved in it from the time it first moved into, before it even moved into this facility, and way back. And my children have been very active, not only going to preschool and camp and all of those things, but have held board positions on the board, on our federation, on Jewish Family Service. My sons have held positions on most of the Jewish organizations.
So that, of course, was a video that allowed Rini to tell her story for well over an hour. We've been able to bring some beautiful highlights about her philosophies, her giving legends, her so many pieces that are beautiful. And she's one of the first the Stanleys are some of the first families that I met when I moved here 25 years ago. And in fact, I would say it really, Ambassador Stanley, Mark, of course, it's so wonderful to see you after you've been here so recently, a few weeks ago, having celebrated and been a guest speaker for the American Jewish Committee. Of course, being there to graduate, to see Asher, your nephew, graduate. And then also to mark Rini's yard site and to be able to be at her unveiling, which we actually have a picture of her tombstone as well. That really, I think, that you shared with us recently, that I think says so much about her passion and what she was so enthusiastic about when it came to giving, the fact that she lived her life as a work of art. She was an incredibly touching woman who had a really challenging life and story. And so we wanted to bring you today to share some of these memories and to be able to talk about some of the philosophies that have come from the family.
Thank you for hosting us today. It's a pleasure to talk about Rini and her life. We used to tease her about her dedication to the Dallas Jewish Historical Society and to the foundation, but even more so just to Jewish life and culture. She was an interesting woman. She graduated high school at 16 years of age in Oxford, England. She was evacuated to Oxford, her second evacuation during the war. Her dad was from Zhytomyr, Ukraine. Her mom was from Warsaw, Poland, and they met in London, but they were bombed so heavily in Stoke Newington in London that first she and her brother were sent away, and she was miserable at the family she was sent to, that she and her brother escaped, made it back to London, and they were evacuated to Oxford, where she graduated at 16. Her sister was a war bride and got pregnant, so mom went over to help her in New York and met my father at a Jewish singles dance. And I guess my mom was about 19 years old, and they got married. Somehow they ended up in Dallas, I think around 1954, 55. I was born in 57, and they made their career in Dallas. They were yin and yang. My dad was supply side, and I guess my mother was demand side. And she was very much into anything Jewish. She was so, I think, scarred by the notion of the Nazis taking over England, and Jewish identity and Jewish culture were very important to her. Her father wasn't educated. He stayed in England for a long time. They eventually got him to New York and eventually to Dallas. But she was so scarred by it. But she took up Jewish culture very early in Dallas with Ziona Balaban and others, Elliot Naxon and others. They started doing Jewish dancing and supporting Jewish artists and other things. There's a book that Barry has a copy of that was made for her in about 1959, celebrating the work she was already doing as a young volunteer to contribute to the community. In 1963, I think she was the first Jewish Woman of the Year at the Jewish Community Center. That's incredible when you look back at it. And those little cues, I think, inspired both David and me and my brothers to get involved in the community. My dad wasn't so community inspired. He was very focused on not being the victim of a depression again. His family lost everything, and I think he was very scarred by that. Had to sell his blood to make money to keep the family going. And he was always focused on the depression and always focused from there. But Mom kept the family going on that stuff. So she was always volunteering for Israel Bonds, volunteering for Federation, volunteering for raising money. She was on the board of the National Foundation for Jewish Culture and stuff like that. And she would, I still remember her bringing Jewish soldiers from San Antonio to our home for Passover. Every year we would have that. She was always, that was very important. Everything was Jewish. When the wars started breaking out in 67 and 73, she was just devastated, and she helped, she and my dad went with some of the first pilgrimages of Dallasites to Israel. She would bring back incredible pieces of art to our house from Israel. And when my dad died in 1989, my mother was really committed to set up one of the very first foundations that I recall to benefit the Jewish community at the foundation, a film fund that was intended, it was a charitable life remainder unit trust that would spin off money for her every year, but then when she died, it would benefit the community. And sadly, last year that came into effect, and it went to the Historical Society and to Temple Emmanuel, to Baylor Hospital and some other places. But she was very committed to all of this. She didn't go to college until I was finished with high school. She went to Eastfield because she didn't have any high school records. So she went to Eastfield, got her degree there, then went to SMU. Then she got her master's degree at North Texas, I think, and then her PhD in family counseling at TWU. So she always wanted to be Dr. Renee Stanley. I'll turn over. Megan, or someone wants to ask David a question. I'll pass.
We definitely want to welcome David. Is what we had mentioned earlier, that you're there with Asher on a trip, his very first trip. Your 18-year-old son, who just graduated high school, is now in Israel as we speak at 10 o'clock at night.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, thanks for burning the midnight oil for us. We'd
No
love
worries.
we'd love for you, David, to share a little bit about how you view the responsibility of you and your brother Mark to, one, honor the memory of your parents, and also how you're planning on engaging your children and grandchildren in the family charitable endeavors.
Yeah. Well, my main passion around all of this has been my association with Israel. And so it was very important to me to bring them all. So everyone except for Asher was able to come to Israel for their bar mitzvah. I took them each individually. Asher was not able to because, of COVID and this and that. But finally, we were able to bring him this year. And that's really how we pass on the legacy of not just, Israel, but of charitable giving is by demonstrating that to them. And in the same way that, my mother was always passionate about buying Israel bonds for the children, we have done that also. And so when Asher actually got an inheritance from my mother, the first thing we did with it was to buy an Israel bond with that money. So that is really, the way that we are, Nancy and I, are passing that legacy to our children.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And Mark, do you want to share a bit about how you're engaging with your family and children?
So, in similar ways. Originally, we had talked about for a while trying to match their gifts for a while. We did that for a little bit, but I think they're already charitably inclined. We did one trip once to Cambodia and Vietnam, and we had a family meeting. We went to an orphanage, and we had a family meeting, and we decided to give. We asked them what they needed, and they said they wanted costumes that they could go perform in Phnom Penh at this big thing, and they needed $5,000. And so we had a family meeting, and we gave them $5,000 as a family gift. And so that was kind of a fun thing to do. But we've been trying to teach them, but we want to make it their own thing, not as a guilt thing. I think after October 7th, they're going to have their own, as they're raising their own kids, they're going to feel their own realization that the importance of maintaining Jewish culture and Jewish identity and Jewish home, because the term never again doesn't, while it's hopeful and aspirational, the notion that anti-Semitism is going away isn't going to happen. The importance, and whether or not we assimilate or don't assimilate, not everybody's agreeing with anyone's plans, that we're always seen as Jews and that we need to stay together. And besides preserving the beautiful culture that we have, we need to stay together, though, to ensure safety and this protection of the state of Israel and the protection of our synagogues and the protection of our institutions and the protection of our heritage. And so you can't do that without protecting the institutions and the synagogues and the historical society and everything, and the culture and the arts and everything like that. And it's not free. And so eventually people have to learn to connect the dots themselves. And we, the institutions, have to sell ourselves better too and make ourselves more relevant. But I think that the sad news of October 7 is going to eventually galvanize and make people figure out what they have to do too, sadly.
I met, I'm here at a Shavuot dinner with friends in Gush Etzion, and we were talking about that, and in a way, how October 7th was really an awakening for everyone, and that so they the question is, how does the next generation embrace, as we get further away from the Holocaust, how does the next generation embrace their Judaism and the need for giving to the community and being part of the community? And it really was an awakening. And as Mark said, maybe our kids will unfortunately be forced into understanding some of the truths that we have understood for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing is we were very successful at winning all the battles after World War II. support for Israel, the fight against anti-Semitism, separation of church and state, support for Soviet Jews. We won everything, and then we became sort of fat, dumb, and happy and complacent. And the truth is that anti-Semitism doesn't go away. And we've got to stay together, and we've got to support our institutions.
I think it also speaks to the value of institutions that are committed to preserving historical records and making sure that these stories, this experience that we're all living through today, is memorialized and preserved so that generations of the future have an understanding and maybe even an appreciation of what a shock October 7th felt like for so many, and what this experience of living in a world with rising anti-Semitism and senseless hatred towards Jewish people, that wasn't the reality for most people, certainly of my generation. So I'm really grateful for families like yours that have committed to telling those stories and saving them in historical record through, partnerships like that with the Historical Society. And to the subject of younger generations, we're certainly seeing that here at the foundation when it comes to the trends and interests of our donors and the families that we work with. We're seeing two interesting things. One, the local agencies that don't have a direct connectivity to Israel are struggling with how do we tell our story and make a case for giving in an environment where there is obviously very urgent crises that need to be addressed in Israel and all around the world. Can you talk a little bit about how you, as philanthropists, what your message would be to a nonprofit agency listening to a conversation like this, thinking, because you're right, we all have an obligation to stand against anti-Semitism and to preserve and celebrate Jewish joy and Jewish identity. And what would be your message to a nonprofit organization that's hoping to resonate with generous donors like yourselves?
I think that Rennie Stanley there was no one more committed to the history of Dallas Judaism than Rennie Stanley was. And I think the message is to really try to celebrate our own community and to understand that we need to connect the next generations into whereas we've all been, all of our lives, Mark and I and the Stanley family has always been involved with a number of different Jewish organizations. And if they're not connected to Israel, we have to find the Jewish voice within our own community. And we do that through synagogue, we do that through organizations, and we do that by telling the story as Rennie Stanley so eloquently did over the last several years of her life.
I look at it also different ways. There are different organizations, depends on what you're doing. There's a lot we celebrate as Jews. We're 1.5% or less of the US population. We certainly box above our weight. There's a lot to celebrate, whether it's in the movies, whether it's in music, whether it's in arts, different arts, or ballet, or whatever you want to talk about. And we're always bragging and celebrating on that. And we need to not exploit, but bring that into our various communities and literature, et cetera, and figure out how to do that. Number two, I think we need to quit fighting among ourselves. And I think we need to have better leadership nationally and globally so that we can quit fighting among ourselves. Number three, I think one of the biggest lessons of October 7 was that we have somehow withdrawn from other communities and that we're much more isolated than we should be, that we need to use these groups to build better bridges, because 98% of Americans really didn't have a dog in the fight between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and yet somehow got embroiled in this whole debate, and instead of using it as a teaching moment, we didn't. And sometimes we also don't stand up when other people, like with the Uyghurs and with the Rohingyas and in Sudan and in Ukraine, and when we don't stand up when other people are in trouble, they don't stand up when we're in trouble. And so we need to build better bridges, et cetera, in my opinion, so that when we need our help, we can do that. So we need to be better global citizens and get more involved. But I think we just need a better strategy in general on a lot of this stuff. And I think we need better corporate strategy on all of this, just in my opinion. But we need to grow up and not be so me, but we. I think part of the problem we had after we won all those victories in the 80s and 90s is our organizations were really busy about just sustaining their salaries personally of their professionals. And I think they got to be more relevant about what are they delivering to the donor. And I think I'm seeing much better relevancy coming from ADL and coming from Dallas Jewish Historical Society. And Megan, what you're doing, your product right now for Dallas Jewish Community Foundation, you've come into the digital age on tracking donations and making it easier to do all that, and making it easier for people to understand how they can do it and take tax deductions and make it work. I mean, that's all, it makes it better, work better too. And we just have to respond better to the donor and make it more relevant to all that too. So all this is we've got to be more responsive, more cost effective. I like the idea, most donors have gotten more sophisticated, and most sophisticated donors now, where they go on the boards and they ask hard questions to make sure the money's being managed well and efficiently and not being wasted. And so all this is going to come into play.
Wonderful. I want to highlight for those who are dialed in that you have the opportunity to also ask questions of the Stanley brothers. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of buttons. You should see one that says Q&A with two little thought bubbles and one that says chat. So if you have a question that you'd like any of us on the call to address or speak to, please submit that under Q&A. And then also we do have the ability to share comments that come into the chat. That's more of a general, thanks for being here today kind of conversation room versus Q&A. So I meant to highlight that at the beginning, and I'm happy to welcome questions from the audience at any point throughout the conversation.
What I've loved most about my fund at your organization is when I've been lucky to make money on stocks, that I can make a donation there and not pay tax on the gain and still be able to make a bigger impact with my money. So
thank you. That is one of the most efficient ways to give to charity is through using highly appreciated shares in a publicly traded security. So as you're preparing for your year-end giving cycle, that's a wonderful venue to look for how to support the charities and causes that you love the most. And interestingly, after October 7th, we rolled out a crowdfunding platform where we could highlight needs across three main themes that we've talked about today: support for Israel, combating anti-Semitism, and securing our local Dallas Jewish institutions. And so since October, not just fund holders of the Dallas Jewish Community Foundation, but the members of the general public at large have contributed more than $2 million through that platform towards those three issue areas. And we're adding new ones all the time. Just this week, we added an organization that is working to put up billboards all around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex that talk about standing against anti-Semitism, standing with the state of Israel, and how can the public at large be a helpful ally to our community during this time.
And that's with almost no overhead, right?
Yeah, I mean, that particular initiative was just born through ingenuity. Partners like Kenny Goldberg and Nate Levine and Charles Pullman have just pulled together this Bootstraps organization, and they have billboards all over the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. They raised within, I mean, I want to say 3 weeks, they had raised 6 figures to support a continued campaign. So
That's
maybe
great.
our next webinar will have to be with the three musketeers on the billboard front.
By the way, Megan, next month I'm hosting the president and leadership of ADL, the president and leadership of AJ Committee, all of the Conference of Presidents of Jewish Organization, the president of leadership of World Jewish Congress, and the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and some others. They're all coming down to Buenos Aires for the 30th anniversary of the bombing of the Jewish Center, which has never been justice handed down for that. And we're talking, and also Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt's coming. So we're having a big thing on anti-Semitism and terrorism.
That's wonderful. My invite must have gotten lost in the mail, I'm sure.
Probably.
Right, yeah.
Well, if there's no questions from the audience, I don't know, Barry, if you have any other questions. We do have another video that I think would be kind of neat to share. And I want to make sure, have we shown this? We've only shown one video so far in the conversation.
Right. So there should be the next one. I can cue it up, actually. You know, what's really great is that, I think I might have mentioned before, you know, within this, not only do we have Reni's oral history, but we also have Mark and David's grandfather as well was recorded and featured in a collection of spoken memories. And so Reni's going to be telling Lewis's story in just a second. It's really special.
My dad came here to Dallas after my mother passed away. He really wanted to he was really pretty isolated living with us because he never drove. He never had a car, never drove. And since both my husband and I were working, I became involved here at the JCC. Started to come over and play cards with different people, and then he met these Russian immigrants who had just come and were going to be living in a housing development, low-cost housing, and he decided that's where he wanted to go to live. And he became not only a friend and interpreter to the immigrants, and was awarded lots of awards from Jewish Family Service, but he would go with them if they had doctor appointments, business appointments, whatever, work appointments, he would go with them. He became a big volunteer with Jewish Family Service in that capacity. So he moved into a Hard, lived in a Hard, from the time it was first opened until he died in 1988. He also was in and out of Golden Acres, and during that time that he was either at a Hard or Golden Acres, he was interviewed.
I love that. It really means the world that we're able to see her tell the story of your grandfather and how volunteerism also played a role in the family as well as philanthropy, and how those two building of communities go hand in hand. We actually have a question that someone asked, kind of, that also this, I think for me personally, as a former volunteer director, I can't help but to feel there's some correlation here, but someone had asked specifically how on a local level in Dallas, what can we do to build those bridges, as Mark was saying, and helping us together to increase Jewish unity. Any thoughts about that?
I think giving people something to do to make them feel better about themselves often helps. So if you have a project, and so Rabbi, if you take your congregation and you have 10 people that show up and you do it with another congregation and you go to a food bank somewhere and you feed people, or you join with a church or two churches and you go to a food bank and you feed people, or you come up with something, you build a house somewhere as a project. I find my experience is when people do something for someone else, they feel better about themselves and they feel better about the organization they're serving. And that's how you bring people together, in my opinion, to put people to work, to accomplish a task, solve a problem. That's how you build teamwork and make people feel better about themselves, in my opinion.
Love that.
Love that. And it can be what I heard you just say, Mark, is that it could be, two synagogues coming together to support, JFS. It could be, yes, right. I mean, it is amazing if we can do things to help and bridge, but if it's also in internal, ways that we can connect our own, strengthen Klal Yisrael, if you will, and create that community, that's equally important.
You know what else? Go to Legacy Senior Living Community,
Yes.
Legacy Midtown Park, and hold a bingo night. Do some other things. Help serve seniors. There's a lot you can do in our community.
That's right.
Yeah, and I
They're
think
having
that
lunch right now.
yeah, I think that Jewish education, both of our youth and of our adults, is a very important part of it too. For the synagogues to come together, which has happened a lot, and have educational processes for joint communities, not just within themselves, but be more community minded.
Meals on Wheels, by the way, through Jewish Family Service is something great. Kosher
Yeah.
Meals on Wheels.
And
But
I think
people
one
feel
thing
good
that
when they do good things for other people.
That's true.
One thing that's really sticking with me throughout this conversation today is that oftentimes there's this perception that in order to be philanthropic, it's about giving of your financial resources. You've got to, write a big check, and that's how you're going to be recognized for your generosity. When younger people in particular are opting to start that journey through volunteerism. And one thing we've rolled out in the last year at the foundation, Mark alluded to a matching gift program within members of the same family. We have families that work with us through their donor advised fund to create matching gift opportunities for volunteer work. So grandson volunteers at an agency, grandparents support that agency with a grant from their philanthropic fund. And education is of course another hugely important area of investment in our community more broadly. So here at the foundation, we just surpassed $3 million in scholarships that have been awarded to over 1,000 individual students. And one kind of cool partnership between the Historical Society and the foundation just happened on the subject of scholarships. Barry, do you want to talk about our newest scholarship?
It would be my honor, absolutely. Unfortunately, as many of you know, I was able to take this position because we lost my mentor and our predecessor, who was a dear friend of Reni's. Deborah Polsky passed away very unexpectedly in May. And when she did, we wanted to keep her memory alive. And in doing so, we, as a Jewish communal worker herself, Deborah always believed in that as a field. And so my executive board came up with a scholarship that will be in her memory with DJCF going forward for college students who are majoring in Jewish communal work.
So
That's great.
Can I tell two stories? Not relevant, totally kind of relevant. I forgot about this.
of course.
When our brother Rick died, David and I raised some money to build a playground at Arthur Kramer Elementary School. And my middle kid, Paul, was inspired by that, and he wanted to build a little league ballpark. And so we helped him do that somewhere, not after my brother, but he built one, at the John F. Kennedy School in East Dallas. And we did it through the foundation, and they were the bucket that people could donate to. And he raised $50,000. We named it the Dave Andrus Ballpark because the Andrus family gave a substantial gift to it. It turns out it costs about $130,000 to build a ballpark, but he raised $50,000. We put a bid out, but DISD said, "Look, we'll take your 50 and we'll finish it. We'll build it ourselves." And they did it and named it the Dave Andrus Ballpark. And we gave him the 50,000. It was really, really nice. But he did this at, I think, 14 years old. And the Texas Rangers came in and helped finish it too. And they gave him the Jackie Robinson Award on the field of one of the Rangers games. And he felt so good about his own philanthropy doing that. And the whole neighborhood, they never had a Little League ballpark there. And they started developing teams. It's still in play right now. They now in that area, they do that. But he was inspired by watching us do something for our brother.
That's
and
really
then
neat.
he did that for Little League. So just, you can set examples in your own family to see
Yes.
that too. It's really sweet.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're approaching. We had budgeted about 45 minutes for this conversation. I have just a couple of observations that I'd love to make in closing, but before I do that, wanted to offer David, you and Mark the opportunity. Is there anything you hope someone kind of walks away from this conversation knowing about your mother, about the two of you, about your family? What would you like to share with this group today?
I think that we are having dinner this evening for Shavuot with a family in the town of Gush Etzion, and we're talking amongst them and talking about how our families came from disparate communities. So our families came over. Two of our grandparents moved into the United States, one from Ukraine and one from Austria, or one from Russia and one from Austria. And that was our father's parents. And then our mother's parents moved to England, also in the early 1900s, one from Ukraine and one from Poland. And so, this has been going on for a long time and for several generations, even to where we are, Mark and I are first generation on one side and second generation on the other. And so we are building the Dallas community. And so there are, we were amongst the original Jews in Dallas, and it has grown so much. And it's so very important for the Jews that are coming into Dallas to be able to embrace what we have built over time and what Renee Stanley has built over time.
And I just want to say that our parents came from nothing. And when some people, they talk about estate planning, they want their money just to go to their kids. And for our mother, her other kid was Jewish culture. And she took some of her estate and she says, it's important to me to keep Jewish culture alive. Mm-hmm. And so coming from nothing and being able to give a sizable donation to Jewish culture is very meaningful. And that's a major statement. And I'm very touched by that. And we were very supportive and excited about that, as you recall, Megan, in our first discussion.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Right.
Well, I had prepared a short donor education segment for this, but I think I will spare you all my educational lecture, but I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. And that was that there are many, many ways and reasons that it makes sense to give while you're living, to enjoy the benefits of your generosity and to experience, or even to, be the physical delivery of generosity, whether that's through Meals on Wheels or bingo night at a senior living community. But oftentimes the most meaningful in terms of sizable gifts and lasting impressions happen through a charitable legacy. And the foundation has been so honored to partner with families like the Stanleys, as well as agencies like DJHS, in helping hundreds, literally hundreds of families perpetuate a vibrant and exciting Jewish life in Dallas, in Israel, and all around the world. And so our call to action for anyone dialed in today: how can philanthropy be meaningful for your family? Number one, we encourage you to record a legacy conversation with the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. If being on camera isn't your thing, we have templates for letters that can be preserved either in my records or in Barry's records. And we really have seen some beautiful conversations between generations of families come from taking the time to document and record what drives you, what has motivated your own philanthropy. Second is a platform, the Jewish Future Promise. This is a charitable commitment to leave a sizable portion of your estate to Jewish philanthropic causes. The foundation is the cheerleader for charity here in Dallas, and this is one way that we are authorized to engage with you. So signing the Jewish Future Promise starts the journey of actually implementing the tools and techniques that we have here at the foundation to cement a legacy like that Rini left for the community. And we talked about this a number of times throughout our conversation today. The Family Matching Grant Program. We can help facilitate matching grant programs within generations of the same family. And like I mentioned, you can even match volunteerism, which is an amazing and easy way to engage young people in family. So please visit our website, djcf.org. If you haven't been in a while, it will look quite different. There's been a lot of change going on at the foundation. We are excited to be the partner in innovation and collaboration and education across the philanthropic sector. And so thank you all. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Mark and David, and to everyone who's joined us today. It's just been such a pleasure spending this time with you. So thank you very much for joining us.